In the oppressive heat of a Roman summer in the year 1503, Pope Alexander VI and Alexander VI's son Cesare Borgia lay stricken with a violent fever, their bodies weakened by an illness that no healer could explain, while murmurs drifted through Vatican corridors, wondering whether this was punishment from heaven, a final turn of fate, or merely the deadly fever that swept Rome each summer. As the lives of Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia slipped away, the truth of their final hours remained uncertain, yet the story of the Borgia family endured, a legacy bound to whispers of corruption, calculated violence, and the hidden affairs of a church struggling between earthly power and spiritual duty. The account of the Borgias begins with a family of modest Spanish origin who, through relentless ambition and strategic brilliance, forced their way into the highest ranks of Renaissance authority, leaving behind unanswered questions, accusations, and mysteries that historians continue to study across the centuries. What follows is a revealing journey into the workings of papal authority, Renaissance political maneuvering, and the calculated violence that shaped an entire era, offering a perspective that challenges long-held assumptions about the Catholic Church.
The influence of the Borgia family extended far beyond their own generation, for their alliances, scandals, and methods of consolidating influence became patterns that can still be recognized in the structures of modern political power.
To understand how the Borgias rose to prominence, we return to a time when popes commanded armies, when cardinals lived openly with mistresses, and when a Spanish family known as the Borgia ascended to power with such force that they came close to dominating the whole of Italy. The story begins not in Rome, but in a small and largely unknown town in the Kingdom of Valencia in the year 1378, where a child named Alonso de Borja was born into a family of modest provincial nobility. The Borgia family carried little expectation of greatness, appearing more likely to produce local officials or merchants than a future leader of the church. Yet their rise reveals a deeper truth about medieval society. Advancement was possible only for those who combined unyielding ambition, keen strategic thought, and a rare talent for understanding and influencing others. For Alonso de Borja, the pursuit of influence began through learning, as education became the foundation upon which the Borgia family's ascent would be built. At a time when many nobles dismissed scholarship as unnecessary, the Borgia family devoted unusual attention to educating their children, and Alonso de Borja studied law at the University of Leia, mastering the intricate systems that shaped both secular authority and church governance, treating his studies not merely as learning, but as a means to understand the structure he hoped to rise within. By the time Alonso de Borja reached early adulthood, Alonso de Borja had become one of Spain's most skilled legal minds, known for measured judgment, quiet competence, and a remarkable ability to navigate the shifting rivalries of church politics, which became crucial when the Western Schism set rival claimants against one another, allowing Alonso de Borja to serve as the mediator no faction could afford to ignore. Alonso de Borja's decisive support for Pope Martin V during the papal conflict earned gratitude of immense political value, leading to Alonso de Borja's appointment as a cardinal in 1429, a moment that marked only the beginning of a far grander strategy. As Cardinal Alonso de Borja, he spent the following decades constructing a network that reached across kingdoms and courts, establishing ties with rulers, merchants, and fellow church officials, while discreetly gathering insight into their ambitions and vulnerabilities, all while placing members of the Borgia family into influential posts so that the rise of one became the rise of all. The Borgia family's method was straightforward yet formidable. They did not strive for the advancement of a single individual, but built the foundation of a dynasty, ensuring that Rodrigo Borgia, and other relatives received elite education and strategic appointments, creating a coordinated power structure within the framework of medieval Christianity. In the year 1455, the death of Pope Nicholas V left the College of Cardinals unable to unite behind any leading candidate, for the most prominent figures carried too many rivalries, and the compromise choices inspired too little confidence, until Alonso de Borja, long regarded as the acceptable option for all factions, emerged as the solution and was elected Pope under the name Calixtus III, becoming the first Spanish pontiff in history. Many assumed that Calixtus III, already advanced in age, would serve only briefly as a quiet caretaker, yet he approached the papacy with the same deliberate strategy that had carried him from provincial noble status to the pinnacle of Christendom, beginning by consolidating authority through appointments that strengthened the Borgia family's position. One of Calixtus III's most decisive early actions was elevating Rodrigo Borgia to the rank of cardinal at a remarkably young age, a move that was not merely familial preference, but a calculated investment in a successor capable of expanding the family's influence for generations.
Calixtus III continued by placing Borgia, relatives and loyal associates in crucial posts throughout the church, reorganizing Vatican finances to favor the family network, and establishing a pattern in which papal resources were treated as instruments of dynastic ambition.
Calixtus III also began transforming the Borgia family from Spanish outsiders into recognized Italian power holders by acquiring properties, commissioning grand residences, and promoting cultural works that laid the groundwork for their acceptance among Italy's elite. Although Calixtus III reigned for only a short period before his death in 1458, these years were sufficient to elevate the Borgia family from relative obscurity to formidable influence, with Rodrigo Borgia now positioned to advance the dynasty even further, despite the expectation among many cardinals that Borgia influence had ended with the passing of Calixtus III. The election of the next pope, Pius II, brought immediate hostility towards Spanish influence, and numerous Borgia appointments were revoked. Yet Rodrigo Borgia, refusing to retreat or abandon the foothold gained by Calixtus III, prepared to confront the family's first major challenge. At the age of 27, Rodrigo Borgia stood in a fragile position, viewed by many Italian cardinals as too young and too foreign to command authority. With family resources that were notable but not overwhelming, and a political network still in its early stages, yet instead of advancing cautiously as most would have done, Rodrigo Borgia chose to make himself indispensable to every faction in Rome. While other churchmen concentrated on doctrine or internal politics, Rodrigo Borgia cultivated the role of mediator and fixer, arranging alliances between feuding families, negotiating peace between hostile city-states, and resolving persistent financial problems that burdened the church, all supported by Rodrigo Borgia's extraordinary memory, social brilliance, and instinct for understanding what people needed. Even those who disapproved of Rodrigo Borgia's conduct found themselves turning to him for assistance, and once Rodrigo Borgia became Vice-Chancellor of the Holy Roman Church, Rodrigo Borgia gained unprecedented access to papal administration, not only strengthening family interests, but also building an intelligence network that extended across Europe.
By the time the 1470s arrived, Rodrigo Borgia had become one of the most influential figures in Rome, possessing grand residences, a princely lifestyle, and wealth surpassing that of many rulers. Yet all of this served only as groundwork for a greater ambition that would soon reshape the political world.
Power, as Rodrigo Borgia understood it, depended not merely on holding a title, but on becoming so essential that no rival could afford to stand against him. And during the 1470s and 1480s, Rodrigo Borgia reshaped himself into a papal contender unlike any the Vatican had ever seen, a figure both highly capable and openly controversial by deliberate design. Although expected to embody clerical chastity, Rodrigo Borgia maintained only the appearance of restraint while engaging in well-known relationships, most notably with Vannozza de Cataneius, who became the mother of Rodrigo Borgia's children Juan Borgia, Cesar Borgia, Lucrezia Borgia, and Geoffrey Borgia. Relationships that Rodrigo Borgia did not hide but openly acknowledged as a demonstration of influence. By displaying behavior that others concealed, Rodrigo Borgia signaled that conventional restrictions did not bind him, and rather than harming his standing, this boldness enhanced Rodrigo Borgia's appeal in a society where displays of strength and immunity to consequence commanded greater respect than outward piety. Rodrigo Borgia's personal life became a political instrument. For Rodrigo Borgia treated Rodrigo Borgia's children not merely as heirs but as extensions of strategic design. Juan Borgia became a military leader. Cesar Borgia was prepared from youth for high office. Lucrezia Borgia was positioned for diplomatic marriage alliances, and Geoffrey Borgia strengthened the family's network through further connections. At the same time, Rodrigo Borgia proved invaluable to each reigning pope by reforming financial operations, improving administrative structures, and establishing procedures that functioned efficiently, ensuring that Rodrigo Borgia's authority grew steadily within every level of church governance. Whenever turmoil struck the church, the cardinals relied on Rodrigo Borgia, not out of affection, but because Rodrigo Borgia consistently solved problems, and by 1490, Rodrigo Borgia wielded influence greater than that of many European rulers, possessing grand residences, renowned gatherings, a far-reaching alliance network from Spain to Constantinople, and enough wealth to shape papal politics in ways unimaginable to earlier generations. The death of Pope Innocent VIII in 1492 created a deeply divided college of cardinals, split between Italian and foreign interests, and between those who favored continuity and those who demanded reform. And into this fractured landscape stepped Rodrigo Borgia, who had spent 34 years preparing for this precise moment, and now intended to seize the papacy through every means at Rodrigo Borgia's disposal. The election unfolded behind closed doors, yet the rumors that followed described extraordinary offers of wealth, positions, and privileges, including Rodrigo Borgia's alleged promise of the vice-chancellorship to Ascanio Sforza, along with the accumulated advantages of that office, not merely as enticements, but as part of a broader vision of firm, capable leadership that many cardinals longed for after a succession of indecisive pontiffs. When the voting concluded, Rodrigo Borgia achieved the ambition that had guided Rodrigo Borgia's entire life and assumed the papal throne as Alexander VI. A shocking outcome for many who had never imagined that someone so openly defiant of clerical convention would lead the church. And yet Alexander VI immediately set out to demonstrate that the decades of planning behind this ascent had purpose.
From the earliest days of Alexander VI's papacy, Alexander VI enacted measures that no previous pontiff had attempted, beginning with securing the long-term power of the Borgia family by elevating Cesar Borgia to Archbishop of Valencia and arranging strategic marriages for Juan Borgia, Lucrezia Borgia, and Geoffrey Borgia to bind influential Italian families to the new papal court. Among Alexander VI's earliest and most controversial actions was bringing Giulia Farnese, still in her youth, to reside within the Vatican, a decision that ignited immediate scandal across Europe as courts whispered about a pope who behaved more like a worldly ruler than a spiritual leader, prompting reformers to condemn Alexander VI and political rivals to consider how to remove him from authority.
Alexander VI, however, anticipated these reactions and used the uproar to expose opponents and strengthen Alexander VI's own position, deliberately defying convention to demonstrate that Alexander VI possessed the power to reshape the rules of papal conduct, while simultaneously redirecting the resources of the papacy toward territorial expansion, diplomatic negotiation, and military planning that aimed to secure control over central Italy and extend Borgia influence far beyond the usual reach of church authority. Within a year, the Vatican had effectively transformed into the command center of a Renaissance dynasty, with Alexander VI integrating Juan Borgia, Cesare Borgia, Lucrezia Borgia, and Geoffrey Borgia directly into papal governance, treating them not merely as relatives but as participants in administration, military ambition, and diplomatic strategy in a manner more typical of a secular monarchy than a religious institution. Alexander VI's financial measures revealed an equally ambitious vision, as Alexander VI introduced new sources of revenue by selling church offices, creating paid religious observances, and devising practices that generated funds on a scale that astonished contemporaries, all intended to fuel expansive political and territorial aims that would reshape the balance of power in Europe. Alexander VI went so far as to commission fabricated relics and charge high fees for pilgrims to view them, and in the year 1500, Alexander VI declared a rare Jubilee year with a newly created holy door in St. Peter's Basilica that could be seen only for a substantial payment, a door crafted specifically for this purpose and unknown to the crowds who believed they were witnessing an ancient tradition, all serving as demonstrations of Alexander VI's deep understanding of human behavior and the power of exclusivity. Through these displays of authority and control, Alexander VI not only generated significant revenue, but also strengthened the aura of papal supremacy, and simultaneously began shaping Cesare Borgia into a future ruler, recognizing that Cesare Borgia possessed intelligence, ambition, and a capacity for decisive brutality that rivaled or exceeded Alexander VI's own, forming with Alexander VI a partnership that aimed to build a territorial dominion unprecedented for a papal family. The pivotal moment arrived in 1498 when Cesare Borgia, then 23 years old, stunned Europe by resigning from the College of Cardinals, an act without precedent because the role was considered a sacred, lifelong appointment representing both spiritual rank and immense political power. Yet Cesare Borgia sought not ecclesiastical authority, but secular rule. In a carefully crafted letter, Cesare Borgia declared a desire to defend Christendom through force rather than ceremony, though the true motive was far more expansive. For Cesare Borgia saw that Italy was divided into vulnerable states, major European powers were preoccupied elsewhere, and Alexander VI commanded the resources of the Church, creating a rare chance for Cesare Borgia to seize territory and establish a new principality. Alexander VI fully endorsed Cesare Borgia's decision, and the resignation itself was almost certainly part of a broader plan orchestrated by Alexander VI to launch the next phase of the Borgia family's ascent. Within hours of Cesare Borgia's resignation, Alexander VI secured from King Louis XII of France the title Duke of Valentinois for Cesare Borgia, a swift arrangement that revealed how long the Borgia family had been preparing for this transition, and the title was merely the opening step in a far larger design. Alexander VI equipped Cesare Borgia with papal troops, papal funds, and papal authority to reclaim territories in the name of the Church, though all observers understood that this mandate served a broader purpose. The Borgia family was initiating a military campaign to dominate Italy. Cesare Borgia's first expedition in 1499 showcased rapid, calculated strikes rather than slow sieges, and the initial targets, Imola and Forli, were chosen deliberately because they belonged to the Riario family, long-standing rivals whose lands controlled key trade routes vital for wealth and strategic mobility. Cesar Borgia's conduct in warfare was decisive and uncompromising, offering leniency to those who yielded and severe punishment to those who resisted. Yet Cesar Borgia paired this ruthlessness with administrative skill, replacing corrupt local rule with functioning governance, improved infrastructure, and coherent legal systems that benefited the population and secured civilian loyalty. By the year 1500, Cesar Borgia's combination of military precision and administrative reform had captured the attention of courts across Europe, as observers began to understand that a papal family was constructing a secular state capable of challenging established powers, revealing the Borgia family as political innovators rather than mere corrupt officials. The year 1502 marked the height of Cesar Borgia's strategic brilliance, a moment when the scale and ambition of the Borgia project became unmistakably clear to all of Europe. In that same year, Cesar Borgia accomplished what veteran commanders had failed to achieve for generations by seizing the Duchy of Urbino in a single night, despite Urbino being ruled by Guido Baldo da Montefeltro, one of Italy's most respected military leaders, whose territory was famed for its strong fortifications and seasoned troops. Cesar Borgia's victory was not luck, but the result of months spent gathering intelligence, analyzing weak points, monitoring troop movement, and cultivating supporters within Urbino, allowing Cesar Borgia to strike on the night of June 20th, 1502, with such speed and precision that Guido Baldo fled into exile rather than attempt a hopeless defense. The fall of Urbino shocked Italy because it proved that even the strongest strongholds were vulnerable to Borgia ambition, and it revealed the deeper strategy behind Cesar Borgia's campaign: the deliberate construction of a continuous Borgia-controlled territory across central Italy, enabling swift movement of forces and sustained consolidation of power. Cesar Borgia demonstrated remarkable military innovation by combining French troops, Swiss infantry, and Italian mercenaries, using each for its strengths while relying on a sophisticated intelligence network and careful diplomatic maneuvers to isolate targets before attacking, a level of coordination that impressed even his staunchest enemies. These achievements drew the attention of Niccolò Machiavelli, who saw in Cesar Borgia a living example of the balance between fear and loyalty, decisiveness and strategy that Machiavelli believed defined effective rule, and their interactions later shaped one of the most influential works in political history, as Machiavelli refined ideas inspired partly by Cesar Borgia's methods. Yet, the very success of the Borgia expansion awakened powerful opposition, as rulers and military leaders across Italy began to recognize that the growing Borgia domain posed a direct threat to the political order they had long depended upon. A conspiracy against Cesar Borgia was already forming, driven by fear of the Borgia family's rapid rise, and what followed became one of the most remarkable tactical countermeasures in military history, demonstrating why Cesar Borgia later stood as a model for generations of political strategists. By the year 1502, the swift expansion of Borgia-controlled territory had created a situation even Cesar Borgia's skill could not fully contain. For although his victories had made him one of the most powerful figures in Italy, those same victories had united rival factions that now viewed the Borgia family as a threat to the entire political order. The danger lay not only in the lands Cesar Borgia had seized, but in the revolutionary nature of his methods. For if the Bora strategy continued unchecked, it would demonstrate that a papal family could use ecclesiastical resources to build a secular principality, a possibility that alarmed established rulers across the Italian peninsula. A more immediate danger came from a coalition of condottieri, professional commanders who had served under Cesare Borgia but had begun to doubt whether continued Bora expansion still served their interests. For although Cesare Borgia's wealth and victories had initially attracted them, many now feared that his long-term ambitions might require removing them as future rivals. By late 1502, a conspiracy formed under the leadership of experienced commanders Vitellozzo Vitelli, Oliverotto da Fermo, Paolo Orsini, and Francesco Orsini, men who knew Cesare Borgia's strengths and weaknesses intimately and planned to lure Cesare Borgia into a false reconciliation before attacking him when he was separated from his main forces. What the conspirators failed to grasp was that Cesare Borgia had anticipated such treachery for months, for Cesare Borgia's intelligence network had tracked their movements and plans, allowing him to devise countermeasures that would turn their own strategy against them. On the final day of 1502, Cesare Borgia met the conspirators in Senigallia under the guise of discussing peace, and while they believed they held the advantage, they were entering a meticulously prepared trap in which Cesare Borgia had placed loyal troops throughout the town, secured every escape route, and planned each detail in advance. When the conspirators arrived, they discovered not a vulnerable leader seeking compromise, but a strategist who had predicted their intentions, and by night's end, several of the plot's leaders were dead. Others were captured, and the failed conspiracy had become a public display of Bora strength that warned all future opponents. The Senigallia trap marked the height of Cesare Borgia's blend of military precision and psychological warfare. Yet even as he eliminated rivals and fortified his authority, the conditions were forming that would one day bring the Bora dynasty down, for their rapid success continued to generate powerful enemies. After Senigallia, Cesare Borgia shifted from warrior commander to Renaissance prince, focusing not merely on conquest, but on building systems of administration, justice, and governance designed to endure beyond the life of a single ruler, an evolution that drew the close attention of Niccolò Machiavelli.
As a Florentine envoy, Niccolò Machiavelli observed Cesare Borgia throughout 1502 and 1503, becoming deeply impressed not only by Cesare Borgia's victories, but also by his capacity to create power through competence rather than inherited privilege, demonstrating that strategy, intelligence, and decisiveness could overcome the limitations of birth and transform the political landscape. During their meetings, Niccolò Machiavelli watched Cesare Borgia demonstrate principles that would later shape modern political thought, always preserving multiple options in any negotiation, inspiring both fear and respect in subordinates, acting decisively when events demanded it, and projecting greater strength than one truly possessed while concealing one's full capabilities. Most striking to Niccolò Machiavelli was Cesare Borgia's attempt to resolve the central challenge of Renaissance rule: how to establish stability in a landscape defined by shifting alliances, rival families, and fragile loyalties, something traditional rulers attempted to manage through inherited authority, divine sanction, or public favor. Cesare Borgia introduced a different model entirely, one grounded in demonstrable effectiveness, implementing administrative reforms that improved daily life through efficient tax systems that reduced corruption, courts that delivered genuine justice, and infrastructure that supported trade and communication, all under a strong central authority that allowed commerce and culture to thrive. These reforms were not merely practical adjustments but statements of political philosophy, showing that legitimate authority could emerge from competence rather than ancestry, and that populations might accept and even support authoritarian rule if it consistently provided security, order, and prosperity.
Niccolo Machiavelli recognized that he was witnessing the emergence of a new form of leadership, and the figure at the center of the prince would become not an abstract ideal, but Cesare Borgia himself, distilled into a model of effective governance that would influence European political thought for centuries. Yet, even as Cesare Borgia reshaped Renaissance politics, he was building a system with a fatal weakness, for all of Cesare Borgia's power depended entirely on continued papal backing, and that authority rested on the life of Alexander VI, now an aging pope whose strength was increasingly strained by relentless political maneuvering, financial pressure from ongoing military campaigns, and the burden of managing a vast family network that spanned multiple regions. Alexander VI's enemies began to realize that defeating Cesare Borgia on the battlefield was unnecessary. They instead needed only to wait for Alexander VI to die. For each passing day drew nearer a papal succession that would determine whether the Boura transformation of Italian politics would continue or collapse. The next papal election would decide whether Cesare Borgia's carefully constructed system of territories, alliances, and reforms would survive through a sympathetic successor, or whether the old political order would rise again, undoing everything the Boura family had built. And this vulnerability became clear to powers across Europe, prompting Venice, Florence, and Naples to prepare for a future without Boura dominance. Diplomats from France and Spain began cultivating relationships with influential cardinals. The Holy Roman Emperor considered how Habsburg interests might be advanced once Alexander VI was gone, and Rome's powerful noble houses, the Orsini, the Colonna, and others displaced by Boura, expansion quietly organized to reclaim their former influence, recognizing that Cesare Borgia's brilliance would mean little without access to the Vatican's wealth and authority. A decisive confrontation was approaching, one that would determine not only the fate of the Boura family, but the trajectory of Renaissance politics itself, raising the question of whether Cesare Borgia's model of governance would endure beyond its creator or collapse once papal protection disappeared. As the deadly Roman summer of 1503 arrived, both Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia appeared to sense that their time was running out. In the final months before the crisis of 1503, the actions of Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia revealed a family racing to secure its legacy before forces outside their control could intervene, with Alexander VI expanding the College of Cardinals by appointing new Borgia-aligned members, selling positions to raise funds, and using the proceeds to sustain Cesare Borgia's military campaigns as the papal treasury was steadily depleted in exchange for hoped-for political durability. At the same time, Cesare Borgia accelerated the conquest of remaining independent territories in central Italy, recognizing that every fortified town and every newly forged alliance would improve Cesare Borgia's chances of survival once the papal throne changed hands. Though this rapid growth stretched Cesare Borgia's forces thin across an expanding domain. Contemporary observers noted the unusual partnership between Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia, a collaboration that surpassed ordinary family loyalty, with Alexander VI supplying institutional authority and financial strength, while Cesare Borgia delivered military victories that elevated papal prestige, creating a unified enterprise built on complementary strengths. Yet this cooperation exposed a profound contradiction at the core of the Boura project. for Alexander VI remained the head of the Catholic Church and was expected to advance the interests of Christianity, while increasingly directing church wealth to benefit the Borgia family, prompting widespread criticism across Europe.
Cesare Borgia's growing state resembled a secular principality more than a papal territory, defined by efficient but authoritarian governance, a costly professional army, and diplomatic strategies that often clashed with long-standing church alliances, widening the divide between religious duty and political ambition. Reform-minded cardinals began organizing resistance to what they viewed as the total corruption of the papal office. European monarchs who had once valued strong leadership now feared the emergence of a militarized papacy, and even former allies questioned whether the Borgia experiment had exceeded all acceptable limits. These tensions reached breaking point in the oppressive Roman summer of 1503, when the combination of political pressure, mounting opposition, and the looming question of succession brought the Borgia dynasty to the edge of its greatest and most dangerous test.
Rome was gripped by one of its worst malaria outbreaks in decades, a disease that flourished in the city's humid lowlands and claimed victims across every social rank, reaching even into the Vatican's walls. On the 5th of August, Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia attended a dinner at the villa of Cardinal Adriano Castellesi, intended as a celebration of recent military victories and a discussion of future plans, but the event instead marked the beginning of the Borgia family's downfall. Within days, both Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia fell acutely ill with high fever, violent vomiting, and delirium, prompting immediate rumors that they had been poisoned, possibly by infiltrating enemies or even by their host, given the number of political rivals who stood to gain from their deaths and the family's own reputation for the use of poison. Although the poisoning theory was widely believed at the time, modern historians generally conclude that Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia were victims of the severe malaria outbreak ravaging the city, as their symptoms aligned with the disease and the timing matched the height of the epidemic, with the rumors more likely fueled by the family's notorious reputation than by factual evidence. Regardless of the cause, the consequences were immediate and disastrous. Alexander VI, already frail at 72, had little chance of survival, while Cesare Borgia, though younger and stronger, now faced the imminent loss of papal protection at the most critical moment in the Borgia family's ascent. As word of Alexander VI's and Cesare Borgia's illness swept through Rome and across Europe, long silent political calculations became urgent, with cardinals preparing for an imminent conclave, foreign powers planning for an Italy without Borgia dominance, and defeated rivals preparing to reclaim lost lands and settle long-delayed vendettas. The Borgia enterprise, built over decades through deliberate planning and ruthless execution, now faced its ultimate test. Whether Cesare Borgia could recover swiftly enough to preserve control of his territories and influence the papal succession, or whether the coalition of enemies surrounding the family would finally seize their chance for revenge. Alexander VI died on the 18th of August, 1503, after 2 weeks of severe illness, ending one of the most contentious and transformative papacies in church history, and within hours, the intricate political system that had elevated the Borgia family to such extraordinary heights began to unravel with alarming speed. Cesare Borgia, still severely ill, was unable to project authority at the moment it mattered most, leaving the territories gained through years of military victories suddenly open to reconquest. The alliances created through diplomacy and marriage dangerously fragile, and the financial support of the papacy now controlled by whoever would claim the throne next. The timing of Alexander VI's death left Cesare Borgia completely unprepared. for he had expected advance warning that would allow time to influence the College of Cardinals, secure allies, and safeguard the family's position. Yet instead, he lay bedridden while the most consequential election of his life proceeded without his involvement. The immediate aftermath exposed the full extent of resentment the Borgia family had accumulated. Roman noble houses, displaced by Borgia expansion, quickly reclaimed estates and offices. Cardinals previously sidelined began reasserting authority, and foreign courts that had tolerated Borgia ambitions now explored new diplomatic alignments. Even within Cesare Borgia's army, loyalty wavered as commanders questioned whether a weakened leader could continue to pay salaries or protect their interests, and professional soldiers, ever pragmatic, saw diminishing reason to risk themselves for a cause that might be collapsing. When the conclave assembled to elect Alexander VI's successor, every cardinal understood that their decision would determine not only the direction of the Catholic Church, but also the fate of Cesare Borgia's territories and the wider balance of power throughout Italy. Cesare Borgia, despite illness, attempted to influence the papal election from his bed, spending what remained of Cesare Borgia's wealth to secure promises from various candidates, using Cesare Borgia's remaining military control over parts of Rome to pressure the College of Cardinals, and even trying to employ Lucrezia Borgia's marriage connections to strengthen support among Italian noble families. Yet these efforts were weakened by Cesare Borgia's fragile condition and by the desire of many cardinals to restore traditional church governance after years of Borgia dominance. The cardinals chose a conventional leader in Pius III, an elderly, devout reformer with no family positioned to benefit from papal favor and no intention of continuing Alexander VI's territorial ambitions. And for a brief moment, Cesare Borgia appeared to retain influence when Pius III confirmed Cesare Borgia as Captain General of the Church, suggesting potential continuity in military policy.
This moment of stability ended abruptly when Pius III died after only 26 days in office, triggering a second conclave just as Cesare Borgia began to regain health and political strength, and this new election would determine whether the Borgia model of papal rule would survive or collapse. The cardinals now sought a long-term, decisive leader to end months of upheaval, and the man they chose was Giuliano della Rovere, who became Julius II, a figure who stood in complete opposition to Alexander VI and who had been among the Borgia family's most determined adversaries throughout their rise.
Julius II, now possessing full papal authority, moved against Cesare Borgia with deliberate precision, revoking Cesare Borgia's military roles, freezing Cesare Borgia's assets, and investigating the legitimacy of Cesare Borgia's territorial claims, while simultaneously forming alliances with every rival Cesare Borgia had made during the years of Borgia expansion. The speed of Cesare Borgia's collapse was extraordinary. Within months of Alexander VI's death, the man once regarded as one of the most powerful figures in Europe found himself isolated, stripped of resources, abandoned by former allies eager to align with the new papacy, and facing the likelihood of imprisonment as the Borgia political structure disintegrated around him. Several of Cesare Borgia's territories declared independence at once, while others were reclaimed by their former rulers with full papal approval, and Cesare Borgia's once formidable army, unpaid and without clear leadership, began to desert or shift allegiance to whichever faction now appeared stronger.
The administrative structures Cesare Borgia had built were dismantled or reshaped into older, traditional church systems, and by the beginning of 1504, Cesare Borgia had ceased to be a significant figure in Italian politics, with the innovative model of governance he had developed erased almost as quickly as it had risen. To many, the Borgia experiment merging ecclesiastical authority with secular ambition seemed to have ended in total failure. Yet the deeper significance of Cesare Borgia's fall was far more complex, for the collapse of his power exposed enduring truths about Renaissance politics that would shape European governance long after his downfall. While rivals celebrated the apparent destruction of Borgia influence, they overlooked the reality that Cesare Borgia had permanently transformed Italian political thinking by proving that rapid, systematic consolidation of power was possible, prompting rulers to study, not dismiss, his methods. The administrative reforms Cesare Borgia implemented became templates for other Italian states, and his strategic combination of diplomacy with military force influenced how future leaders pursued territorial expansion, embedding Borgia innovations into the very political fabric of the Renaissance world.
Most importantly, Cesare Borgia proved that capable governance could create genuine loyalty, inspiring a new generation of rulers who realized that effectiveness mattered more than noble ancestry. Yet Cesare Borgia's greatest legacy came from the meticulous observations recorded by Niccolò Machiavelli, who had witnessed how power could be built, sustained, and ultimately lost through strategic choices. Niccolò Machiavelli saw that a gifted leader could overcome extraordinary obstacles through calculated planning and uncompromising execution, but also learned that even the strongest political enterprise could collapse if it depended too heavily on forces beyond its control. These lessons later formed the foundation of The Prince, which distilled Borgia methods into principles adaptable across eras and political systems. Machiavelli's study of Cesare Borgia's rise and fall became one of history's most influential works of political theory, ensuring that Borgia innovations continued to shape European governance long after the family's power had vanished. Meanwhile, by 1504, Cesare Borgia was effectively under house arrest in the Vatican, monitored closely and prevented from rebuilding influence, as Julius II chose to neutralize him through political irrelevance rather than execution, which might have turned Cesare Borgia into a martyr. Yet Cesare Borgia responded with the same strategic resolve that had defined his earlier successes, refusing to accept defeat and instead planning an audacious return, beginning with a daring escape from papal custody achieved through bribery, deception, and precise timing, slipping out of Rome in April 1504, so quietly that Julius II did not realize he was gone for several days. Cesare Borgia fled to Naples, seeking refuge with Gonzalo Fernández de Córdoba, the Spanish commander governing the kingdom for Ferdinand of Aragon, a logical choice given that Cesare Borgia had cultivated Spanish connections throughout his rise, presenting himself as a useful ally capable of advancing Spanish interests in Italy. The Spanish reaction to Cesare Borgia's arrival was complex, reflecting both the potential value of his experience and the political risks of sheltering such a controversial figure. Ferdinand of Aragon understood that Cesare Borgia still possessed intelligence of immense value, including knowledge of Italian fortifications, troop movements, and political alliances that could aid Spanish expansion. Yet Ferdinand of Aragon also recognized the diplomatic danger of openly sheltering such a controversial figure. Ferdinand of Aragon therefore adopted a pragmatic solution. Cesare Borgia was received courteously, but held under strict supervision, treated simultaneously as a welcomed guest and a closely monitored prisoner, allowing Spain to benefit from Cesare Borgia's expertise without provoking open conflict with the papacy. For nearly 2 years, Cesare Borgia remained in this ambiguous position, advising Spanish commanders while quietly preparing for a return to power, maintaining correspondence with loyal supporters in his former territories, and analyzing intelligence reports from across Italy for signs of instability that he might exploit. During this period, Cesare Borgia developed a new strategic philosophy shaped by the failures of his past. Recognizing that his earlier reliance on papal support had been a fatal weakness, and that any future attempt to rebuild power would require broader, more independent foundations. Cesare Borgia's opportunity arrived in 1506 when his brother-in-law, King John III of Navarre, requested military assistance to suppress a rebellion threatening the kingdom, a strategically significant region positioned between France and Spain, whose internal conflict carried implications for the wider balance of power in Europe.
Cesare Borgia recognized the request from King John III of Navarre as an ideal chance to display Cesare Borgia's enduring military skill while establishing a new foundation of power that did not rely on Italian politics. For a successful intervention would prove to European rulers that Cesare Borgia's earlier triumphs had not been the result of papal favor alone. The Navarre campaign became Cesare Borgia's final effort to reclaim status as one of Europe's foremost commanders, a test of whether the strategic brilliance that had once reshaped Italy could still prevail despite the disadvantages created by his fall from influence.
The campaign began with promise, as Cesare Borgia's reputation as a military innovator attracted experienced commanders eager to serve under a leader known for transforming Renaissance warfare. And within months, he assembled a formidable force of Spanish troops, Italian mercenaries, and local soldiers loyal to King John III. Cesare Borgia's early operations showed that his tactical sharpness remained intact, relying on swift maneuvers, detailed intelligence gathering, and psychological pressure to break entrenched resistance, causing rebel strongholds that had withstood royal assaults for months to collapse within weeks of his arrival. Yet, the Navarre campaign also exposed how much the political environment had changed since Cesare Borgia's peak, for the rebels in Navarre were supported by French funding and advised by seasoned French officers, making them far stronger opponents than the isolated Italian lords Cesare Borgia had previously defeated. Even more concerning, Cesare Borgia's past successes made him a target for ambitious commanders seeking fame, as many rivals deliberately sought battle specifically against units under Cesare Borgia's direct command in hopes of earning the prestige associated with defeating one of Europe's most feared military figures. The decisive confrontation occurred on the 12th of March, 1507, near the town of Viana, where these accumulated pressures would bring Cesare Borgia's final campaign to its tragic end. Cesare Borgia was pursuing a retreating enemy when his forward units became separated from the main army, and instead of waiting for reinforcements, he chose to attack with only a small group of his most trusted soldiers, a choice that reflected both his greatest strength, boldness, and the impulsiveness that had always carried risk. Cesare Borgia's willingness to take personal danger had long earned deep loyalty and often allowed him to seize opportunities more cautious commanders would overlook. Yet, in this moment, it left him exposed, and the brief battle that followed saw his small force surrounded by superior numbers, and Cesare Borgia himself killed in the fighting. His body, stripped of armor and weapons, was found the next morning barely recognizable to those who had once feared his name, and news of Cesare Borgia's death spread quickly across Europe, provoking reactions that showed the extraordinary impact he had made on Renaissance politics. Rivals celebrated the fall of a man they viewed as a dangerous innovator, while former allies mourned a leader who had shown them new political and military possibilities. But the most consequential responses came from political thinkers and military strategists who recognized that they had just witnessed the end of one of the boldest experiments in European governance since the fall of the Roman Empire.
The effects of Cesar Borgia's rise and fall continued to influence political theory, for his demonstration that competent rule could secure widespread loyalty shaped the behavior of absolute monarchs, and his synthesis of military innovation with diplomatic strategy became a model for future leaders. More than anything, Cesar Borgia's partnership with Niccolò Machiavelli produced insights into the nature of political authority that endured long after the details of Renaissance Italy faded, and the figure at the center of The Prince was not merely Cesar Borgia himself, but a new blueprint for leadership, adaptable across eras, regions, and circumstances. Although Cesar Borgia died in obscurity on a Spanish battlefield, far from the Italian territories where he had once appeared unstoppable, the ideas he had introduced regarding governance, military innovation, and political authority continued to shape European development for centuries. For the Boer Revolution in politics outlived the man who had embodied it and proved far more enduring than contemporaries imagined. The story of Lucrezia Borgia represents one of the most complex and misunderstood parts of the family's legacy. For unlike Alexander VI and Cesar Borgia, whose ambitions were overtly political and military, Lucrezia Borgia's role was defined by the limited choices available to women in Renaissance society, even women born into influential families. From early childhood, Lucrezia Borgia was regarded by Alexander VI and Cesar Borgia not as an individual with personal ambitions, but as a diplomatic instrument whose marriages could forge alliances essential to the Boer family's rise, reflecting a common practice among noble families, but one the Borgias pursued with unusual intensity. Lucrezia Borgia's first marriage, arranged when she was only 13, was to Giovanni Sforza, Lord of Pesaro. Selected to secure Boer influence with the powerful Sforza family who controlled Milan and large territories in northern Italy, yet the union was transactional, formed without regard for compatibility or well-being.
The marriage soon became a source of political embarrassment, for Giovanni Sforza proved weak and unreliable, unable to deliver the strategic advantages Alexander VI and Cesar Borgia had anticipated, and he eventually criticized Boer policies publicly and distanced himself from their increasingly controversial actions. Alexander VI responded with characteristic ruthlessness by declaring the marriage invalid in 1497, claiming it had never been properly consummated, an action that protected Boer interests but further deepened the perception of Lucrezia Borgia as a pawn in her family's political machinery.
The annulment allowed Lucrezia Borgia to be remarried to someone more politically advantageous, but it also ignited damaging rumors about the true reasons behind the dissolution, as Giovanni Sforza, humiliated and eager to protect his reputation, claimed that Alexander VI had annulled the marriage not for political strategy, but out of desire for his own daughter. These accusations of incest were almost certainly false, driven by Giovanni Sforza's need for revenge rather than evidence, yet they became embedded in the lasting mythology surrounding the Boer family, illustrating how the family's enemies used scandal and moral outrage when political or military means failed. Opponents understood that accusations violating the deepest social and religious taboos could inflict greater damage than battlefield defeat, shaping public perception more effectively than any direct challenge.
Lucrezia Borgia's second marriage to Alfonso of Aragon, Duke of Bisegli, highlighted both her continued diplomatic significance and the growing dangers of being tied to the Boer dynasty. For Alfonso of Aragon was selected to strengthen papal influence in southern Italy, particularly in the vital kingdom of Naples.
At first, this marriage seemed far more promising than Lucrezia Borgia's first. Alfonso of Aragon was closer to her in age, more personally compatible, and initially devoted to building a stable and affectionate relationship. Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso of Aragon had a son, and contemporary accounts indicate that Lucrezia Borgia developed genuine affection for her second husband, Yet the marriage soon became a casualty of the larger political struggles surrounding the Borgia family. For as Cesare Borgia's campaigns intensified and papal policies grew more aggressive, Alfonso of Aragon was forced to choose between loyalty to Lucrezia Borgia's family and the interests of his own relatives.
The conflict became untenable when Cesare Borgia's expansion directly threatened territories controlled by Alfonso of Aragon's allies, and in July 1500, Alfonso of Aragon was attacked near the Vatican by unknown assailants, surviving the assault only to be murdered weeks later, almost certainly on Cesare Borgia's orders, demonstrating that even marriage into the Borgia family could not protect those who became obstacles. Alfonso of Aragon's death profoundly affected Lucrezia Borgia, revealing to her that Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia valued political advantage above personal bonds, and prompting her to realize that her survival depended not on affection, but on remaining useful to their ambitions. Lucrezia Borgia's third marriage, to Alfonso d'Este, Duke of Ferrara, marked both the height of her diplomatic value and the beginning of her transformation from political pawn to independent figure. For the Este family governed one of Italy's most sophisticated courts, known for its commitment to culture, art, and scholarship, offering Lucrezia Borgia an environment in which she could develop her own identity. The negotiations for the marriage revealed the extraordinary measures Alexander VI was willing to take to secure an alliance, providing a substantial dowry, promising military support for Este territorial aims, and agreeing to legitimize several of Alfonso d'Este's illegitimate children, terms so generous that they overcame the Este family's initial reluctance to ally with the scandal-marked Borgia name.
By 1501, Lucrezia Borgia was no longer the young girl offered in marriage purely for diplomacy. She had endured multiple political unions, navigated dangerous court intrigues, and learned to safeguard her own interests in a world where loyalty was frequently overshadowed by the pursuit of advantage. Lucrezia Borgia's arrival in Ferrara marked the beginning of a profound transformation that would define the later years of her life, allowing her to establish a legacy independent from the scandals that had surrounded Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia. For in the Este court, she would grow into a capable, respected figure whose reputation stood apart from her family's notoriety.
The Borgia family had begun as minor nobles from an obscure Spanish town, yet within a little more than a century they had reshaped European politics, redefined the limits of papal authority, and created a template for power that would influence governance for generations, revealing fundamental truths about ambition and the nature of authority.
They could be brutal when it served their aims and undeniably corrupt in their use of church resources, yet they were also innovators who understood that power in a changing world would belong to those who could adapt, strategize, and act with relentless efficiency. And their legacy endures not in the lands they briefly controlled, but in the methods of leadership they pioneered. Whenever a leader combines military strength with diplomatic cunning, uses scandal as a political weapon, or prioritizes results over traditional morality, they are echoing strategies the Borgia family refined 5 centuries ago. Strategies that continue to appear across politics, business, and technological power structures.